Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I start, I just want to apologize that we had a small technical glitch. I just hope that you have found the revised link to see this session. A warm welcome to the Alicorn Leadership Summit 2020. I'm Rochelle D'Souza, and I'm a principal at a mid-market private equity fund called Lighthouse. I've been an ambassador of WinPE since its inception, and proud to present the second of the three power-packed series in a run-up to celebrate WinPE's one-year anniversary coming February. The Alicorn Leadership Summit is all about celebrating power of gender diversity. Our first session featured 4 powerful women who have successfully built unicorns. If you missed it, you can watch the recording on the WinPE YouTube channel. Our finale on Feb 18th will feature global leaders including Stephanie von Friedeberg, the CEO of IFC, Ken Melman, partner, global head of public affairs and co-head of KKR Global Impact, and Mitch Truitt, co-CEO of Apax Partners and the chairman of Apax Digital, talking about the changing face of the investing industry and the role diversity is playing. Registration's open now, so make sure you register. Now on to today's panel. Almost a year back when we launched WinPE, we had a discussion with a panel of distinguished PE leaders, including Abhay Pandey from A91, Mukund Krishnaswamy from Lighthouse, Roshni Bakshi from Everstone, and Sandeep Nayak from General Atlantic. Now, these leaders talked about the importance of and the challenges surrounding gender diversity in the investing ecosystem. And they ended the discussion with a message on the way forward. The video recording for this session as well is available on the YouTube channel. Today, we will pick up that conversation again to assess the progress that was made, to take stock of where we stand, and to identify the areas that need work. A message for the industry, from the industry. We have a distinguished panel again of GPs and LPs who will deliberate and discuss their views. We will first have the GP panel, followed by the LP panel, and then a powwow session between the two, GPs and the LPs. Ladies and gentlemen, hope you have your headsets tuned in, your coffee and tea freshly brewed, for you are in for a very interesting session. The session is being live streamed on Facebook and YouTube. Unfortunately, this is not being streamed on LinkedIn due to technical issues. You can send in your live comments, likes, dislikes, I hope there are none, and questions throughout the course of the session, and invite your friends and colleagues for the same. Now, let me move on to introduce the GP panel today. We have with us Gopal Jain. He is the managing partner and the co-founder of Gaja Capital, an India-focused growth and buyout fund based in Bombay. Gopal leads both executive and investing functions at the firm and has personally led several of the firm's investments. Gopal is an active columnist and currently the member of SEBI's Alternative Investment Policy Advisory Committee and Indian Private Equity and Venture Capital Association Executive Committee. Welcome, Gopal. Next, we have in line. Hi. Next, we have in line GV Ravishankar. GV is the managing director at Sequoia India. At Sequoia, GV leads investments. He's deeply interested in technology's role in helping drive efficiencies, reduce costs, and improve access in consumer and healthcare markets. He currently serves on the board of several leading companies, many of them unicorns, in the consumer, financial services, and the education space, among others. Welcome, GV. Next, we have in line Vishal Mahadevia. Vishal is the managing director and the head of India and the member of the executive management group at Warburg Pincus. Prior to joining Warburg Pincus in 2006, he was the principal at Greenbrier Equity Group, a fund focused on private equity investments in the transportation sector. Prior to that, Vishal worked with 3 Cities Research, a New York-based private equity fund, and a consultant with McKinsey. Welcome, Vishal. Now introducing our moderator for the day, Nupur Garg. Nupur is the founder of WinPE, the invisible force behind managing all of that that's happening behind, a leading investor in private equity and the venture capital, and an expert advisor to large financial institutions. She serves as an independent member on the investment committees of NIIF, FFS, managed by SIDBI, and DGGF, investment funds mandate, and as an independent director on several boards. Nupur was listed among Forbes India W Power Self-Made Women 2020 among India's top 100 women in finance, awarded the Women Entrepreneur Award for 2020, and Business Excellence and Innovative Best Practices Academia Award. The list just moves on. Welcome, Nupur. Now over to you, Nupur, to conduct this panel.
Thank you, Rochelle. A very good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to all our viewers. And once again, sincere apologies for the technical glitch we had. And I hope all of you have been able to join us. And I hope those who haven't will find their way to this link very soon. Research has shown that gender-balanced investment teams deliver a 20% higher IRR than the median. It has also correlated gender balance in leadership teams at portfolio companies with approximately 25% greater increases in valuations. And the fact that women make roughly half of the talent pool and roughly half of the consumer base is enough to highlight the missed opportunity in excluding them. Yet, for the same research, women make up only 7% of senior investment professionals in India, and only 4% of private equity and venture capital funding has gone to women-led businesses. This panel today is a discussion with leaders from the investing industry on the state of gender diversity. We had a similar session in Feb 2020 at the WinPE launch. And over the last year, the discussion points from that session have charted the course for WinPE and for our partner firms. So for example, last year, the panelists committed themselves to specific actions on enhancing gender diversity in their firms. No pressure on our panelists today, but with those action points, WinPE and all our mission partners created a list of action items that we have collectively worked on with extreme passion over the last year. And I'm pleased to say we will be sharing a report very soon. We are very close to achieving all of those action items. Another thing that came up repeatedly was that having more women attracts more women, and it creates a virtuous cycle. That is at the core of WinPE's work, and we have stood true to that over the last year. Next, that panel noted that we need more women in the boardroom. We are working on that. Stay tuned for news on that front. Finally, that panel had challenged WinPE to have an all-woman panel by the time we hit our first anniversary. And we delivered that in 9 months. The first session of the Alicorn Leadership Summit was a quote-unquote vanel. So as you can see, at WinPE, we are well past the stage where we have to discuss the merits of gender diversity. Today, with these industry leaders in the hot seat, we want to jump straight onto the next steps and the next set of actions that we would like to take in order to create a gender-balanced investing industry. So if I can start, 2 short questions. First, can you please share in 1 word what gender diversity means to you? Should we start with Gopal? 1 word only.
You know, you're asking me to do the impossible, which is to
Gopal, 1 word,
topic
1 word.
related to women and answer that question in 1 word. You're already starting to sound like my wife.
Gopal, 1 word.
Centrality, you know, the centrality that women have to our lives. You know, gender diversity to me means extending that to work.
Thank you. GV?
Opportunity, and I'm happy to discuss that more, but it's a massive, massive opportunity for us to benefit from this extraordinary talent that we are not utilizing well enough.
Vishal?
I would use success, because for me, achieving gender diversity is critical to being successful as an investor, as a PE firm.
Beautiful, beautiful sentiments. And we'll come back to these sentiments. Now, just stay focused on these really powerful feelings, and share with us what, in your view, is the biggest practical challenge facing firms as they work on building diversity in their teams and their portfolios. Gopal, why don't we start with you again?
You need a one-word answer?
Not one word, but one challenge.
Well, women have so many responsibilities. I think their strength becomes their weakness. And the challenge with many professionals is that compared to their male counterparts, they don't have as much control, as much independence when it comes to their decisions. So this for us has been the biggest challenge in terms of, uh, you know, um achieving what we've wanted to do for many, many years, which is find the right place for women inside our firm, inside our portfolio companies, and so on.
Thank you. GV?
Yeah, I would say still my top issue is the one of funnel. Um, while this is improving, there is still a long way to go. I'm kind of thinking about the places I've been and the batches of cohorts of people and what representation we had. While things are improving, I think still we need to go down more to the grassroots and figure out a way to create more balance so that we have this fixed over time.
Okay, thank you. Vishal?
Yeah, so I echo what GV said, but I would add one more. I think one of the biggest issues is, maybe the word to use for it in my mind is an unconscious bias when we are going through the interview process. And this holds in diversity in general, not just gender diversity. I think we tend to interview and like people who are like us. And so if your interviewees are all male and they've all had 5 years of private equity, you're going to find male private equity experienced people coming into the firm. And it's unconscious, it just happens. And so I think just making a conscious effort to try to change that, I think, can yield some results.
Fair, fair. And I think it also extends to this bit about the networks that women develop over a period of time and the networks that men develop over a period of time, or rather, the shortage of networks that women develop over a period of time as compared to the networks that men tend to develop over a period of time. So as we sit here and we think about how do we build diversity, and we get these ideas about how women are central to everything that's going on at work and at home, and sometimes that becomes the single biggest challenge they face. So as leaders of firms and as influencers of a lot of portfolio companies, and when you think about integrating the success that is your outcome, and the opportunity that lies in building gender diversity with the challenge of finding women and enabling them to perform their various roles and discharge various responsibilities, how do we take a step towards that? And GV, should we start with you?
Yeah, happy to Nupur. First, let's all recognize this is still a massive problem, right? All of us, it's great that Vinpi is taking the charge, but we should all be more aware of it and more conscious of the problem. And it's a problem not just in our industry, it's across sectors. And it's a tough problem, and there are no easy answers. Some of the answers are long-term, and it requires a long-term commitment to solve it. I spoke about funnel, and some of those are longer term solutions. You got to look at, the composition in MBA, composition engineering. By the way, engineering, there's some recent, data that suggests that India is now producing more engineers, women engineers, than even the US. So, some of these are changing and it's going in the right direction. So some of those kind of, take time, but it'll get solved. The other thing is the very important point that Vishal mentioned, which is, changing the biases and kind of creating much more awareness within our own systems, such that there is a little bit of an extra effort and a stronger commitment to making that change. And this is kind of, if you think of it at the firm level, but at the ecosystem level, Nupur, and this problem, as you probably, well know, is not just the diversity problem is not just a PEVC problem. It's there in the entrepreneurship ecosystem as well, right? And you shared some statistics about funded, women entrepreneurs, just a small number today. And, that is something that, will change only if, exactly the point you pointed out, right? Which is about creating those networks. And when people find it harder, somebody else has to overcompensate a little bit and make that extra effort. So let me give you some examples of what we've done. And I'm not saying we are really good at it, but we are making a strong effort in the direction. We actually surveyed women founders over the last couple of years and to understand what their problem was. And exactly like what you pointed out, it became one of outreach and access. There's a huge issue for them, right? They don't have potentially the same networks and access. So we have to create a conscious effort to meet more of them. So one way we've done this, and Nupur, again, you're familiar with it, we started a Sequoia Spark program focused on women founders in India and Southeast Asia. We launched about 2 years ago, give or take. As a part of this program, we do on a continuous basis what are called office hours for women. So we meet a lot of the investment team members and the broader team meets women founders. And it's kind of a networking session. We talk about company building. We talk about the challenges they face. And we try and do this on a continuous basis. We have touched probably more than 250, 300 women, but it's still early, right? We have to do a lot more of this, right? We are also sponsoring some other things. We sponsor a program called the Generation Girl, which is a not-for-profit organization in Jakarta, which tries to improve women participation in STEM type of activities. We are working with the Niti Aayog's Women Entrepreneurship Program, again, to extend mentorship and company building knowledge and networks as a part of that platform to women founders. So a lot of those things happening on that. The progress between last year and this year, Nupur, and you mentioned about last year's panel, is, the last 2 out of the last 3 associates we had in the firm were women. 2 out of the last 3 senior professionals we hired across what we call portfolio specialists that work very closely with our portfolio companies. And these are very senior, important people. 2 out of 3 were also women. So we are actually consciously looking to make changes. It's not sufficient when people come and say, I can't find, we push back and say, hey, let's try harder.
GV, I love that. I love that approach of saying, I will try harder and we will make it happen. And thank you for that. I will continue that conversation on finding women in portfolio companies. So you're in the early stage space, and obviously you work more with entrepreneurs and more with early stage ideas. Gopal, you at Gaja, you have a couple of companies that are led by women, that are founded by women entrepreneurs. Was that conscious? If you think about how you want to build diversity in your portfolio and your team, just based on your experience working with these fantastic women, are there some insights, some experiences that you would like to share?
Sure. So, Nupur, I think it also starts with choosing themes. And fortunately, a couple of themes that we've chosen, education, for example, is women friendly. We've had companies in which 80-90% of our employees are women. One of our portfolio companies, 92% of our employees were women. You can guess what sort of a company that was. So both education and financial services, by nature, attract women entrepreneurs. And so over the years, we've had the opportunity to work with women entrepreneurs. And taking a step back, what's basically happening? This is not altruism. This is commercial. Women are becoming increasingly important as consumers, right? We are backing women entrepreneurs and we are backing women professionals because women consumers are becoming more important. And yes, of course, men and women are equal in so many ways. But I think let's, for a minute, assume there's a bias that women entrepreneurs and women professionals can address women as consumers better. So that is one part. That if the moment you recognize that women as consumers are arriving, then so many of the investments that we've made, look at Chumbak, which is a woman-oriented business. The founder is a woman. Look at Kangaroo Kids, kids and mothers, founder is a woman, and I can go on and on. When it comes to people in our firm, we are a 15-year-old firm, and we've been scouting campuses for talent for 15 years. And now we know that we have a leadership program that works in the sense, what is the function of a leadership program? To deliver partners. So we've had associates join us and become partners. And for us, if I can just reduce this to simplicity, now finding a woman as a partner in Gaja Capital, over the last 15 years, we've gone from X to Y number of partners, and all of the incremental delta has come from our leadership program. So for a woman to now become a partner, which is actually the central thought of our entire recruitment process, what we want what we need is women to stay in the firm for an X number of years. So it's down to that formula, because we know that if we have women who stay in the firm for X number of years, they'll become partners. We've so far not been able to achieve that. And that goes back to the first point I made. But I can tell you that for the last 4 years, the data has become consistent. So for 4 years in a row, our leadership cohort now has women in it. Right? Earlier, it used to be patchy. 1 year we would have a woman, next year we wouldn't. But now 4 years consistently, we've had women in our leadership cohort.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Gopal. There is clearly there is a lot of progress being made, and it's very exciting to hear that. Vishal, moving on to you, you also have a global perspective, and as a global firm, Warburg has been interacting with investors and with portfolio companies at a much larger scale, and interacting with markets at the global level. What is it that you're hearing? What is it that you're seeing? And specifically, if we start to think about the extra effort that needs to be made in order to bridge these gaps, if you could think about the point on, can gender be a non-financial metric similar to ESG?
Yeah. So, firstly, thanks, Nupur. I think let me step back a second to answer your question directly. First, yes, and I actually believe it already is, and that's being driven by investors that look at us. When people look at companies, when we evaluate companies and portfolio companies in future investments, you are thinking about diversity, and it's a very important metric to us. Could more be done? Yes. Let me give you some statistics, because it'll help you when you think about and maybe some ideas and what we've done globally to help push more diversity. So today across Warburg globally, more than half, 58% of our non-investing professionals, that's our operating professionals that are working with our portfolio companies, so across accounting, finance, HR, IT, are women. This is really what I would call the operating professionals of the firm. On the investing professional side of the firm, about 23% are women. Now, that's not great. Don't feel great to say that, but that number 5 years ago was 5%. Okay, so a lot of work has gone into the last 5 years thinking about this and proactively trying to change it. And while we have a long way to go, it does show that progress can be made. And I'll just give you a few examples of some of the things we did to just jog some thoughts to your question. Now, and this comes to GV's point earlier, completely agree on the funnel, at least 1/3 to 50% of the incoming interview slate has to be diverse, so female candidates. Depends on the office, depends on the geography. Again, I'm giving you a global view. We don't have any hiring quotas because we don't believe that's the right way to go. But I think if we change the funnel, that's the first step, and that we definitely have put in place at the firm. Secondly, as our summer internship program, we have a summer internship program between business school. In New York, all our summer interns are female. We don't yet have that here in Mumbai, but the aim is to have at least one to be a female candidate. Again, this is more driving the incoming slate and the funnel issue that GV talked a little bit about. We also try to go a little bit earlier. So we're sponsoring something in the US called Girls Who Invest. It's a nonprofit, it's a group that actually works with college women to try to introduce them to investing as a career. And every year we have 2 summer internships. Again, this is at the undergraduate level for sophomores who are women who are interested in investing as a career and get an early start to learn about it and get mentored. A lot of other things. And of course, we're proud to be associated with WinPE, which I think is doing a fantastic job. So a lot of things, but I think increasing the spotlight, as you talked about non-financial metrics, but just generally increasing the spotlight on gender diversity is the first start at the senior level to get attention on it. Why don't I stop there?
Thank you, Vishal. Because we started late, we are conscious of the fact that we do need to end on time. So, why don't you hold on to those thoughts? And what we will do is we will reconvene. I think it is time for us to invite the LPs in and hear from them. But please stay with us. We will be requesting you to join us again shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nupur. Let me move on to introducing the LP panel. It was a very interesting GP panel, but I think it's up to the LPs to make it a bit more interesting. So we have with us Harsh Singhal. Harsh is a managing director at CDPQ, responsible for the externally managed investing program in India. Prior to joining CDPQ, Harsh worked with IFC in New Delhi. Harsh has also worked with Boston Consulting Group and PwC, where he worked on diverse areas ranging from investment structuring, M&A, and operational improvements in companies. Hi, Harsh.
Hello.
Next, we have in line Jeanette Hall. Jeanette is a director at ADB's Private Sector Operations Department, in charge of the bank's private equity funds and the blended finance program. She joined ADB in Jan 2012. Previously, Ms. Hall was a senior banker in the investment banking group at Bank of America, San Francisco, as well as in the corporate finance group at KPMG, New York. Welcome, Jeanette.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sujoy. Sujoy is the business leader with over 3 decades of extensive experience in emerging markets investing and project finance, covering infrastructure, industrials, and services sector. During his career, he worked in projects covering 50 countries across Asia, Africa, Europe, Middle East, and so on. He joined NIIF as the MD and CEO in 2016. And prior to that, 25 years with IFC, the private sector investment and the financing arm of World Bank Group. During his tenure at IFC, he has held several leadership positions. Welcome, Sujoy. Nupur, over to you again.
Thank you, Rochelle. Welcome, Harsh, Janet, Sujoy. I'm sure you enjoyed listening into what the fund managers were saying. It was by design, getting them to go first and bringing in the LPs later. So, now your turn. Can you please share in one word what gender diversity means to you? Why don't we start with Harsh?
Well, to me, it's sustainability, basically long-term sustainability of whatever we are doing.
Spoken like a true investor in infrastructure.
No, I think, the reason, I say this is there are lots of examples where, to me, gender diversity is building, a team which has, people from different backgrounds. And that actually is a very good risk mitigant. We have seen lots of examples where companies have imploded, where the team at the top was not so diverse. So that's why I said sustainability.
Thank you. Sujay, why don't you go next and we'll keep Janet for the last.
My word would be inclusiveness. So anything that is not inclusive will ultimately suffer, struggle, and potentially die. And hence, for me, inclusiveness is really the word I would use to respond to your question.
Thank you. Janet?
Yes. So my word would probably be priority. I think just being able to focus on women more, put them in the limelight, and just put them up front, I think is quite important.
I think that's amazing. From centrality, opportunity, success coming from the first panel to sustainability, inclusiveness linked to almost survival and success, and then priority. I think these are incredibly powerful ways of talking about gender diversity. And I think we are into a very interesting discussion now. So what about the next question? Harsh, what do you think is the biggest practical challenge facing firms as they build gender diversity?
Well, I think, I agree with what was said in the previous panel, and especially the point around funnel. And funnel is actually, the way I think about funnel is at 2 levels. So one is, actually getting lot more girls to join the industry. I think that is a big issue. And then girls being aspired enough to, to go up the leadership curve. So, I mean, we talked about the funnel issue, so I'll not go into detail, but on this aspect around, girls aspiring enough, I think, whenever if I have spoken to my colleagues and, people in my family, girls have this fear that, if you spend too much time on your office, then your family will suffer, etc., etc. So I think, there needs to be a lot more positive vibe, which needs to come from all of us, that if you put in that extra effort and if you put in that put in that aspiration, it's not wrong. And secondly, I think more importantly, we need to show examples that it doesn't cost family. Women leaders, they have very happy families. I think that's a very important point which needs to come out, so that a lot of good talent, they are motivated enough to keep jogging and keep running the marathon to rise up in the industry.
That's really beautiful, Harsha. Thank you. Janet, what about you? What do you think is the biggest practical challenge?
So I think what I see today is probably the implementation. I think a lot of firms and institutions want to be able to do the right thing. They have the policies in place, but sometimes they don't have the resources, to be able to track the gender data or to be able to actually implement the policies. So I think if you provide those resources, to these institutions, you'll see a lot more happening than just, putting lipstick, I guess what you would say, on the cover and then just walking away. So that's what I think needs to be done.
Thank you. So, Joy, you've recently built an organization and a very large team. So I hope you're not going to say it's a challenge to find women in the funnel. What do you think is the biggest challenge you have faced in building a diverse team?
So I'm going to use the same word that Vishal used, but with a tweak. So I'm going to say it's subconscious biases. And actually, we've come up with some very clear ideas on how to go around it, and I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to share those with you as you go through this. And I'm probably the only person over here who's an LP as well as a GP. What I like to do is basically lead with example. So we'll talk a little bit about also what we are trying to do in literally overcoming some of the subconscious biases. And what we observe is once you do that, it's actually not that much of a challenge. Things can be done.
So Joy, it's basically you are in both the places. So, if a fund manager is talking about challenges, you've been there, you've experienced the same challenges. So probably as an LP, it puts you in a slightly advantaged position, or maybe in a slightly unfairly advantaged position, because, probably you have examples that you can share with a number of fund managers that can put some of those concerns at rest, right? So, as you think about how LPs can carry the conversation forward with fund managers, as we think about persuading fund managers to think about diversity across different aspects. Where do you think, Sujay, where would you like to start?
Look, first of all, for some reason, I lost my video on my screen, so I don't know if you guys can still see me, but I'm just going to keep talking. I'm assuming you can still hear me, right?
We can hear you.
Yeah. So look, I mean, the way we are going about doing this, and this is working for us in our own firm, because even on the LP side, we are really a fund of funds. So we are delighted that ADB is an investor in our fund of funds, and we operate thinking of the high standards of what we're trying to do. So we are really looking at a kind of a scorecard approach where we look for a few key things to achieve what we want to do, which is a more inclusive firm and a firm that is diverse. And these I'll mention some of the easy things here. And we are, by the way, we are gonna, in our due diligence of GPs, we want to bring these into action as well. And the first one is what I think Janet referred to, which is women-friendly policies. And I think the simple ones over there are things like maternity leave, childcare, flexibility in schedule, location, etc. Because in today's world, you don't need to be in one place, and you don't need to always be in that one place to get your business done. So I think the way that life has evolved actually allows us to be much more inclusive in our policies. So that's one aspect. Second aspect is to look at what I think Vishal referred to it, which is to look at whether in every position that's being filled, whether there is diversity in at least the not necessarily in the outcomes, but at least in the process. So is the pool of people who've been looked at been diverse? And of course, gender diversity is clearly one of the key aspects of that. Third thing is equal pay. And I'll tell you, I actually experienced this incredibly close at hand, because when I was looking at one of NIIF's annual increments, I realized that women were actually quite consistently on the low side. And when I dug into it, why was this happening? Because when we were recruiting women, they were actually coming with lower pays than men in similar positions and with similar experience. So we actually took the initiative to actually equalize pay, and actually get over that one-time issue that we were facing. So that's another angle that we are going to look at. And finally, we are going to look at women in leadership roles, right? Because again, someone said this. I saw this play out in IFC, which is when I joined IFC, there was there was a sprinkling of women across the management stream. And then by the time I left IFC, we had a significant amount of women in leadership roles, and the funnel, as people are talking about, actually increased, dramatically through the management position. So I think all those are four things of four specific items that I'm mentioning, but there are a few others that we intend to include in a scorecard, which we're going to look at as part of our due diligence. And when we see managers that are kind of, I think, again, the word that's been used, I think this is playing into the sustainability of firms. It's playing into the sustainability of decision making, all these kinds of aspects. And I think it's going to play into also the sustainability of track record of returns, right? So all these aspects come into play, and I think it's going to become a key part of our due diligence as an LP.
Thank you, Sujoy. I think the whole industry will welcome a statement and a commitment to gender diversity from an LP as credible as an IF. So thank you for that. Janet, I'll pass on the baton to you. ADB has been really passionately pursued the gender diversity agenda, and I'm familiar with the discussions that you've been having with fund managers and in encouraging them to think about diversity in their teams and portfolios. How do you think this is going to move forward? Do you think there is the potential to, make gender the next ESG? Is that the right approach? Do we push it down fund managers' throats? Do we force them to do it? Where do you think the ADB experience is leading you to?
Sure. Before I touch into that, so I think as Sujoy had mentioned, we had invested in NIF, and I actually wish we had this event before that, because I would have, put that as one of our requirements. So Sujoy, I might want to renegotiate, our agreement.
Janet, you don't need to. You have a GP over here who's actually leading and volunteering to put this there. So, you can put in more money, and we'll be happy to negotiate those as terms at that time.
Okay, great. All right. So I think before I tackle that, I do want to be able to emphasize that LPs can obviously make a difference, right, in terms of, moving our GPs towards this gender balance and driving change. And in particular, multilaterals like ADB have this additional measure, and we call that additionality, that we have to bring to each transaction. And that can be in terms of raising environmental, social integrity, and now even promoting gender equality. So that, I think, allows, the multilaterals to even have a bigger play on this gender agenda. So, so while ADB has really been a big champion for gender, I have to admit it was only in 2018 that we had official corporate targets. And in fact, that was part of our strategy 2030, which is our long-term corporate equity paper, strategy paper, sorry. And in that, we have actually now targeted for both sovereign and non-sovereign, 75% of our transactions have to have a gender tag. That's huge. So, and to put that into scale, that 75% target is the same target that we've used for climate change. So you can see that it's really very important for ADB. And it's a leadership commitment that has cascaded down all the way from our president to our board members to senior management, to the point that it's really almost impossible to get a deal through. Not impossible, but challenging without having some gender tag. So on the private equity funds, that's not an exception. So I can also tell you that in the past, the norm was always just to have these funds having no gender tags. But today, every one of our funds have at least 2 gender tags. And I think that's tremendous. But what is more interesting, which is what Nupur had alluded to, was the fact that we're not just there about creating policies and procedures. We want to take it one step further. And one of the things that we're now doing is encouraging our fund managers to adopt some type of gender scorecard. And this scorecard could be about, just tracking the number of women in the workforce, the number of women who own companies, women in leadership, products and supplies, and just the likes. And we first had this in 2018. We had another fund again who embraced that in 2019. And last year, I know the fund that Nupur is talking about, and I won't put them on the spotlight, but they also agreed to adopt that. So for me, what I've asked my colleagues in the funds business is that let's really up our game. Let's no longer just focus on the 2 gender tags. Let's push them, to do these scorecards, not only at the time of investing, but also post-investing, so they are aware of all the different, disparities that you can see across the different products, supplies, and the workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. And Harsh, I'm just coming to you because I do want to hear about sort of the non-DFI aspect, the pensions, the insurance companies, and CDPQ in itself has a number of initiatives that support diversity. Now, what are the kind of things that you're thinking about doing as an investor, not internally only, but externally with the firms that you work with?
Sure. No, I think Nupur, diversity is like becoming very central part of our investments. And as you said, it is touching both internally as well as externally. So I'll just first focus on what we are doing externally. So, we are using an approach which is a mix of influencing and as well as, putting out policies which will influence our portfolio companies. So on the first part, actually, we have, a network called Investor Leadership Network. So that is a network of 14 global investors like us who manage close to $5 trillion of assets. And all of these investors have signed up for 3 key pillars, and diversity is one of those. Apart from that, it's climate change and sustainability. So all of the investors are actually working towards, achieving a greater diversity in their investments. So, that's just to set the tone in terms of at a high level how we are thinking about it. It coming to how we are influencing our portfolio companies, I'll just give you one example. We have actually a couple of months ago, we have put out a voting policy that will apply to all the publicly listed companies where CDPQ is an investor, that if after 2022, those companies don't have 30% of their board representation by females, we may reserve our right to vote against a board change in those companies. So that is a very strong statement in terms of how things may shape up for us going forward. And I would draw an analogy to how ESG kind of evolved, and that's where I would think that we are seeing diversity, and frankly I feel that diversity moving from an encouragement to kind of a must have, the time is quite short. So that's how I would say CDPQ is doing. And there are other initiatives also internally, but I would just want to give you a broader sense of how we are thinking about it.
Thank you for that, Harsh. And I think it's time for us to applaud the LPs we have here, because this is exactly the kind of impetus the industry needs. And before we talk more, I think it is time to bring the fund managers back in. And with them back in the room, I think we should pursue a couple of themes. One theme I want to pursue a little more is. And it had come up in an earlier conversation with Sujoy, was about how diversity and gender could in some manner become your differentiating quality, or your competitive edge. So Sujoy, would you like to share that thought again, and then we can maybe invite one of the GPs to add to that?
Sure, happy to. So, Harsh brought this thing up about diversity, gender diversity, other forms of diversity becoming the next ESG. And I'll look at the analogy. So, ESG standards or practices, you have three things. Prohibited practices. So, for example, I won't do coal. Second is minimum standards, that I'll at least do this kind of stuff for everything we do. And third is leadership. And leadership was where a firm like IFC very early on went into renewables, went into microfinance, way before the rest of the market had actually found those sectors and made a lot of, made serious returns in those sectors, right? And I think this is where things are going. When I talk to, and we speak to a lot of pension funds, a lot of multilaterals, and the number of women in senior roles over there is quite, is very impressive, right? In pension funds, in multilaterals, and so on. And I can see that firms that actually show their commitment to these kinds of aspects are going to be able to differentiate themselves and be ahead of everyone else when when diversity becomes what sustainability has become today, right? And this is coming. I mean, I can see that it's coming, and I'm a part of this this group called the One Planet Sovereign Wealth Fund group, and there the whole approach is not basically minimum, is not sort of like ESG practices, but it's actually leadership. It's setting standards, it's setting internal policies, it's disclosing and setting your own sort of targets and kind of managing them yourself. And in my mind, and by the way, I'm a part of that, and all the large bulge bracket private equity firms are there. And I was recently in a meeting where the CEOs of GIP, of BlackRock, all CEOs meaning the chairman of all these firms are there, basically saying, we are the people who are going to do this, so give us your money. They were saying this to the sovereign funds. So the point I would make over here is that the Indian GPs who don't actually start coming into this kind of frame of mind are actually going to be at a disadvantage to the bulge bracket GPs who are going to figure this out really quickly. And hence, at NIIF, I'm crystal clear that what we are going to do is actually lead, because that's the only way we continue to differentiate ourselves and bring standards, governance, various different aspects, leadership, to a very important subject, which is gender diversity. So that's really what, Nupur, you and I were chatting together with Janet, and sort of that's the way I'm thinking about it.
So you're basically saying if an LP is meeting two fund managers, it is definitely possible that at some level, the unconscious or subconscious bias may lead the LP to actually prefer the more diverse team as compared to a team which is just men making a presentation.
That's precisely what I'm saying. And it's basically, and I think the whole pitch, the story, the sustainability of the firm, the leadership aspects of the firm, a track record is going to be only one thing. I mean, if you look at what's happened with ESG, track record, if you're doing coal, your track record may be fantastic, but you're not going to get money. And that's going to happen down the road, I think, to gender diverse or non-diverse gender teams as well. or non-gender diverse teams as well, right? So I think it's coming down the pipe.
Thank you. Thank you. Vishal, would you like to add to that, right? I mean, the global perspective, the bulge bracket label that you have. And again, you and I were chatting about the need for a firm to, support a cause like gender diversity. And, GVV will come to you as well, because at some level, you guys are doing well, right? The track record is great. Your funds are doing extremely well. Why do you really need to do this?
Yeah, I'd actually go. I mean, I would actually step one step behind. I think diversity will help you make better investment decisions and generate better returns. We have a guy who comes and talks. He's come to talk to us 3 times at our global offsites, at our senior partnership team. It's a guy called Michael Mabusen. I don't know, some of you may have heard of him. He's written a few books on this. He's actually really outstanding. And for people who are listening and may want to Google him and figure out, just start talking of basic examples on why you end up with better decisions when you have a diverse set of people making their input. And I'll come back to a little bit of the unconscious, subconscious bias that Sujay and I have been harping on. If you have everyone from the same background and the same type, that's going to lead to groupthink. You're going to end up in one place. So again, I think as a firm, you have to start believing that diversity will lead to better returns. And then that's going to drive people ultimately to have diversity. Yes, you need senior leadership to push it. Yes, you need metrics. Yes, the LPs should absolutely hold us to task and say, we won't give you money if you're not diverse. But in the end, people will do it if they believe in their hearts, it'll lead to better returns. And that's kind of where I show up or land on the thought.
GV, you've been nodding your head really vigorously.
Yeah, because I think Vishal has summarizes so well. It has to come from within. I mean, we have to believe. And frankly, Nupur, you started by saying people make 25% better IRR. I mean, look, those are big numbers you can't ignore, right? So if it's out there in the data, it makes the case, and we all know it, right? We all know from experience when we have women in the room, not just in the investment decision, but as board members. And we've seen this, right? Just a very, very different perspective. And sometimes you wonder, oh, and I never thought about that. And, that's because of where we come from. And we just, men think in a certain way and women do think in a slightly different way. And it's so additive and it can be so value adding to the decision that, and it's clear, right? It's not, and maybe this topic is on gender diversity, but just even diversity of professions. I mean, most of the firms will hire from, McKinsey, and, Vishal and I are sitting here, and so there's so much similarity, and, you will get that same groupthink answer because, we're all patting each other on the back saying, oh, we think so much alike and it's so great. But that's not what you want. You want those points that are made that don't conform to how you're thinking. And that's where there's an insight, and you want to push towards those insights to make better decisions.
Janet, do you think LPs and usually DFIs have had to lead the way on matters like this? Do you think LPs are going to start including gender as part of, the non-financial metrics that fund managers need to measure and report on, similar to ESG?
Yeah, so as a multilateral, we obviously cater to a very different GP base as well. So it's not just the pure commercial, we have a dual mandate. And because of that, many of these funds have to be willing to subscribe to our very high environmental standards and integrity. So, but yes, I do think that they will need, to be able to subscribe to these, gender targets and these tags. But as I mentioned before, I don't think it's just about doing the 2 gender tags or the 1. It's really upping the game and getting them to actually be much more, doing the gender scorecards, at investing, post-investing, revamping their policies, and just being much more accountable. I think that's, what we're going to be seeing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Gopal, you've worked with DFIs as your LPs. You've gone through that whole journey of putting in place the ESG standards and the measurement and the reporting, etc. Where do you come out when you start thinking about that template getting a little more complicated with gender getting thrown in?
Well, I think, as a firm, we've done so many things right over the years. We've invested in women-oriented themes. We've backed women entrepreneurs. We've invested in companies, like I said, where the majority are women. I think the mountain that we still have to climb is to find a woman as a partner, in our investment team. I just don't believe. I have seen that women can be great investors. You know what I mean, Nupur? Right? I've seen firsthand that women can make great investors. And of course, this also separately ties in the point around diversity promoting performance. So our thought process is currently the mountain that's left for us to climb as Gaja Capital, after, in a way, at some level, consciously seeking gender diversity over 15 years, because of the themes that we've chosen, is now how do and when will we see a woman as an investment partner?
Well, fingers crossed for that. I am very conscious of the time and the fact that we'll lose Sujoy and GV in a couple of minutes. I want to move on to our last section, and I want to just give the audience a heads up that after this last section, we'll open to Q&A. So this is the quick fire round, and please react in just one sentence to these questions. And it's sort of free. I'm not going to ask any one of you to respond, so just jump in. Okay, the first one. We want to hire women, but can't find any women.
Not true.
Try harder.
I'll say
Lots of
challenging,
women.
but very possible.
There are lots of women. The statement is untrue.
I'm so glad.
I think
There are lots of women to hire.
exactly. I think if you really want to hire a female, you can. You just have to be much more creative.
Yeah, I'm telling you. I mean,
Okay, we
it
can't
used to be
hire laterally.
patchy, but it's becoming increasingly consistent. See, campuses in India, talent pool in India has changed over the years.
Absolutely.
When I went to IIT, I mean, out of what there was like maybe in a batch of 300 or whatever, there were like 10 women or 15 women. Today, 25% of the campus, I think, or 30% of the campus, my nieces are at one campus, right? Similarly, when it goes to right? So the campuses have changed. There is talent pool over the years. Women have risen to leadership positions. So there's no shortage of women to hire.
There's no shortage. And in fact, 80% of the messages that we get at WINPI are all from women saying we want to enter PEVC as an industry. We just don't know how. So it all comes back to the question of networks. Okay, The next question. We
Even
can't
in
hire
accounting, Nupur, even in accounting, there are so many women.
Okay, sorry, I'm looking at the time. We can't hire laterally. Investors have to grow internally, and partners have to be groomed internally.
Yeah, so I'll
Not
kick
true.
that
Not
off.
true.
So a broader approach to recruitment can yield very positive results. And I'll give you an example which we have actually benefited from. A lot of women take time off their professional careers in the middle of their careers. Very, very good, good investment professionals take time off because of family reasons. And typically, in not just in India, but around the world, this is something that has been observed. We have actually benefited from actually recruiting some of these women who were not, in their professional careers, but sort of had taken time off, and they've been fantastic. So as Janet said, being more creative about the way you look for women professionals will yield results.
Nupur, adding another dimension to it, what we when we were looking at our own internal gender diversity, we found out that almost 1/3 of our ICs didn't have women representation. So now today, CDPQ makes sure that all ICs have at least one, or if not two, women on these ICs. And these are initiatives to make sure that we also accelerate the career path for women. I mean, all the women in our organization have a mentorship program. They formally get a mentorship from senior members of the organization.
That's very powerful. Mentorship and sponsorship can be two incredibly powerful tools that support journeys that women have. Thank you for sharing that, Harsh. The next question. Investors don't have any bias at the time of making investments. They're only looking at what idea makes the most money. And okay, hang on. I'm going to rig this a little. Before you react, let me remind you that per research in 2019, only 4% PVC funding had gone to women-led businesses. So, what do you say to that?
Well, we are
Investors don't have any
more biased than we think.
Investors look at the same set of cash flows. So one of our funds is an infrastructure fund. Investors look at the same set of cash flows, and different teams come up with completely different valuations for those cash flows from their perspective. So clearly, I think the statement, is absolutely false that investors don't have biases. They do bring their biases to the same set of information. And that's why I think the point that Vishal made, which is the basic subconscious issue that we need to solve for, is through diverse perspectives going into an investment decision.
Investing in women entrepreneurs starts with starting to think of women as consumers. And, so if you have male dominated firms, they will struggle. We will struggle to understand women as consumers. I think the moment you start focusing on themes that are women centric, women friendly, then you start backing entrepreneurs, you start backing women entrepreneurs.
The last question in this section is firms that haven't signed up to WinP.
Do it now.
They are missing out on learning from others. They're missing out on learning from, some of the smartest like Vishal and GV.
Can I just say one word? Dinosaur? No? Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's very useful to be part of WinP because it actually, at least for myself, it's made me more aware. And it's helped me understand the whys, because I always knew that it's good to have a diverse team. But I think these kinds of discussions, and also some of the discussions that, I have discussions on these questions, etc., with women colleagues here. And it helps me understand what they're going through, why we need to do things differently, what can make a difference. And Nupur, I have to give you credit that it's really WinP that over the last year has had me thinking in a much more structured manner of how to go about this. So that's why I think every team should join, every investment firm should join WinP, because it will help them come up with better answers to these very important questions.
If I can add one point to that, Nupur, and I know we're running out of time, I would say there tends to be a little bit of a misconception where people think I join WinPE because it'll help, and I have women at my firm currently who can then, interact with WinP. And I think it's the opposite. As an industry, we have a problem. I mean, we know it, staring us in the face. And so supporting WinP to help solve it as an industry, come up with innovative ideas, is all of our responsibility. It's not an individual firm's responsibility. And so for me, I really would encourage all of our peers to just join to support us as an industry to solve this problem.
Just adding one more dimension to it, Nupur, one thing which I find heartening when I meet industry leaders in India, PE investors, all of them actually want their firms to become an institution, and an institution which can compete with the BlackRocks of the world. Now, that kind of objective is not going to be fulfilled if we have only male-dominated firms. We need to have diverse teams. So it's something which fits their aspirations. So they should actually participate.
And also for ADB, I have to admit, so I was looking to see which of the DFIs, have already been members. So we're guilty, but we're obviously looking into this. But I agree. I think organizations like WinP are very critical. It goes along with the lines where I said that implementation is something where I think the firms are now lacking, and that's where WinP can actually make a difference. So, as my other panelists here say, I do encourage you to also become a member of this important initiative through this organization.
Thank you. This is, I put that question there on purpose, but I'll be very honest here. For us, it is really gratifying to work with fund managers and leaders like each one of you. And the last year has been extremely fulfilling because as an LP in my prior life, I was a little worried that this could become a check in the box for most people. But it has been really incredible to see the level of passion and commitment that has come from each one of our member firms in really doing something about it. And just hearing from you, I think everybody at Wimpy is very, very grateful for your feedback, for your support, and to have you here. And we probably will be losing Sujoy and GV now. So we'll still take like a quick 5-10 minute for Q&A. So the first question we have on the screen is, as per your industry experience, at which stage, thank you. At which stage of career do women start experiencing the glass ceiling, and how can that be addressed? Who wants to take a shot at this question?
I don't know if there's a glass ceiling. Of course, I don't think the glass ceiling exists across the board. We've heard of great examples. Vishal's given an example from his firm. It's a firm that all of us can learn from. I'd like to take a step back and say that, it's tougher for women to continue working, and like Sujoy said, they have to take a break from their career and stuff. What we've seen is that many women who start off as associates, when they reach the mid-level, that's when turbulence hits their career. So that's what I've seen. I think I'm not talking about the glass ceiling, but I'm talking about issues that in terms of, wanting to take a break, and perhaps and for the right reasons, but the turbulence starts hitting them at the mid-career level.
Janet, Harsh, Vishal, would you like to add something to that?
No, I think I agree with what Gopal said. It's and I would actually just going back to the analogy I had put in my opening comments, is exactly that. It's not only about the break, but it's that fear in your mind of not doing enough for your family, and that leading to women actually participating less in your career. That leads to mid-career women actually fading out, if I can use that word, some of them.
And Nupur, with your permission, I'd just like to add something here that, I know there are a lot of women watching this program, and some of them are aspiring to join the industry. Private equity is it's a tough industry. And, it's a two-faced industry. It's very glamorous on the inside, and it's very demanding on the, so it's very glamorous on the outside, I beg your pardon. It's very demanding on the inside. If we look at our attrition over the last 15 years, 90% of people who've left our firm are no longer in private equity. So actually, it's not that they've chosen to go and join other private equity firms. They're very capable, intelligent people, but they've chosen that this is not a lifestyle for them. So so private equity is a tough career in general. And of course, firms have to make the extra effort to somehow retain women and keep them inside in those environments for long enough where they can become partners. This industry will change when you start seeing women as investment partners.
Yeah, I have to agree to that. So I was just thinking about my career, and so I've always done very fast-paced, very demanding types of industries. So I did public accounting, long hours, investment banking, long hours, and so I think in the beginning there was always a lot of women, but as as we do rise up, the demands become quite great, and therefore a lot of women choose to actually just leave the industry, and so that's where I think that's where the attrition starts. But the point that Gopal made, where he said that there needs to be a support. So like in ADB, they do encourage people to take special leaves without pays, and that can be taken, if you want to be able to advance, whatever your career, you want to take some time off. It does give that time, for women to actually reset. So I think those things could be critical. And could probably encourage more women, to stay in the industry.
So I guess we are saying that once we start looking at it as more of a business-specific problem and sort of seeing the the commercial and the business proposition in being able to hold on to talent, regardless of whether it's male or female, firms would probably find themselves working slightly differently, and creating an environment that I believe would then also make life easier for men, right? I'm sure there are men who want to go home on time and spend time with their families at, golf, etc. So I guess what we are hearing is that it usually happens when women start to feel the tussle between work demands and family demands. And obviously, that is consistent with what research shows across different industries. So thank you. Next question. What is the one most important / predominant change that you have seen in the new breed of entrepreneurs today, both men and women? Anybody willing to take that? GV would have been great to answer this particular question.
Do you want me to?
I'm happy to just say like one thing maybe to start, which is I actually see a immense sense of confidence in the new breed of entrepreneurs. I mean, the Indian entrepreneurs always had confidence, but when I look at the new breed of entrepreneurs, poised maybe with the successes that we've seen over the last decade, the confidence that you see in what can be achieved and their view for the future is even higher than what I would have said you would have seen a decade ago.
The profile of Indian entrepreneurs has changed completely over the last 30 years, Nupur. When I started investing 25 years ago, there was a lot of families, and we were investing in family-owned businesses. Today, the almost entirely our entire portfolio comprises of first-generation entrepreneurs. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. The second thing that comes to mind is that until about 10 or 15 years ago, most entrepreneurs would not start with venture capital. Today, the typical entrepreneur we meet at the growth stage is already contracted venture capital, and therefore is a lot more systematic, etc. The institutions are better built. The third is a new phenomenon, which is that men and women, which is more women founders and also husband-wife teams. I'm just saying that aspect, in the context, especially of this discussion. We never used to see that 10 or 15 years ago. Today, it's becoming a lot more common. So just some things that come to my mind in terms of how the profile of entrepreneurship has changed over the last 30 years.
I think if the panel doesn't mind, we'll take one last question. I know we are already over time, but which are some of the funds across the globe that you would want to call out that are doing great on the gender diversity front and in India? I mean, in India, I would say all fund managers that we have been working with are doing incredible work in supporting diversity, in building diversity, even if they don't have the best possible statistics right now. That is clearly a goal that they're working towards.
No, I won't be able to comment on other funds, but I can say for CDPQ at least. So two things. One is, we are very, very fortunate that at India team level, we have exactly a 50-50 split. Actually, we have more females in our team than males. So that is one. And secondly, we did a benchmarking for ourselves on the, investor leadership network, which I mentioned earlier, the 14 large investors. And we saw that, we are in the middle. On some aspects, we are ahead of other investors. On the others, we were about average. So we are there, but, we also recognize it's a long journey and we are on the right track is what I would say, at least for CDPQ.
Well, I would like to cite IFC maybe as an example. I think IFC and, as an example, the DFI sector, I didn't say ADB, Jeanette, because you're here and I didn't want to say it to your face, but I think we'll talk about IFC. Nupur, you have links to IFC. And so many of the good practices that we are following at Gaja Capital are thanks to our learnings from IFC. But it's an environment in which I've seen women over the years. and in leadership roles.
All right. So with that, I think we should close the panel. We have 15 minutes over time. We are once again very, very grateful to our panelists and to our audience. Thank you for bearing with the technical glitches that we went through. But it has been a fantastic conversation. It is also a conversation that has led to a number of outcomes, which we at WIPI will obviously record and share with our member firms. And I'm sure our member firms will, once again, with a huge amount of passion, just adopt all of these outcomes and work towards them over the next year. And we will reconvene next year for another discussion with the industry to take stock of what we have accomplished in 2 years. So thank you once again to the panel. Thank you for joining us today. Over to you,
Thank you,
Rohit.
Nupur.
And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Gender diversity brings in the power of the and. It's multiplicative, not just additive. So with GPs and LPs like the ones represented today, I feel confident that probably in another 5 or even 10 years, the gender scorecard may just have 10s across the board. So I thank all the panelists for their time and their insights. Thank you all for attending, and please keep a lookout for our third session on February 18th. Good day and good night, everyone.
Thank you.